Trico.
I can only imagine what Fumito Ueda must have been thinking when The Last Guardian finally went gold a few weeks ago. There are few equals to him and his team within the industry, so while The Last Guardian being released is a huge achievement, it must be a slight wrench that it's not being released precisely how it was envisioned all those years ago. The Last Guardian has issues, and we'll come on to those much later, but for all of its delays, it's a wonderful video game that offers so much. In fact, in a way, it comes across like a historical artifact. Within it, you can see the origins of the PlayStation 2 and 3 era that The Last Guardian was contrived in, but you can also clearly see the technical prowess that the era of the PlayStation 4 has been able to give it. Unlike so many other games, The Last Guardian does a wonderful job of not providing you with any hints on where to go or what to do next. Its somewhat linear landscape is sculptured in such a way that eventually you'll realise where the next part of your journey leads to. Video games have got to the point now that you're almost expecting a navigation marker or a mark of white or yellow paint, as in the Naughty Dog games, to signify where you need to go or what you need to climb next in order to move forward. The Last Guardian bypasses these and provides no hints or direction. The closest it comes to it is by Trico giving subtle nods or glances in a specific direction, but for the player to notice, you need to be attentive to what Trico is doing. You need an understanding of how your companion lives and breathes. Never before has an animal tracking down a scent been able to provide observant players hints about which direction to go. Even for those who aren't as cottoned on to pick up Trico's nuances, the game itself isn't overly challenging, despite a lack of clear help provided to the player. Perhaps by doing this, it shows its roots as a game that's concept was drawn up at the back end of the PlayStation 2 era. But coming off the back of recently released games like Watch Dogs 2 that tells us where to go and how to do it so often, it's nice for the developer to have trust in the player that they'll make it through to the next section. This design also allows for an increased number of what I like to call aha moments. Scenarios where you'll wander around for a couple of minutes, unsure what to do or where to go, and then suddenly it'll all click. The Last Guardian has moments that are clearly predetermined by the way the game was developed, but at the time, a lot of them feel like unconventional ways of achieving a goal. It's these little moments that feel unscripted that made me fall so much in love with both The Last Guardian in general, but also Trico itself. Trico is a beast that is unlike any other you'll ever encounter in a video game before or after. The way it walks, runs, dashes, plays and jumps is so lifelike you'd think that an actual Trico was used to do mocap. The way it graces and complements the world around it is fascinating to watch. At times I sat back and watched as this mythical beast strutted around the world around it, exploring nooks, smelling strange scents and generally just being a wild animal that was trying to reach a common goal with the young boy. The way it interacts with the player character means that there's no need for an on-screen hub. As the boy, you're able to try and command the beast with R1, pointing to areas, asking Trico to jump or even knock parts of the environment over. Sometimes, Trico just won't listen, and instead wander off somewhere else or not quite understand what you're trying to tell it. But the way that Trico is programmed makes it unclear as to whether the AI is just failing or whether its disobedience is actually intentional. The way Trico is presented is as an animal with its own mind, its own thoughts and ways of doing things. So if it doesn't want to jump up to the cliff face you want it to, it doesn't look like the game is broken or that the AI is failing. It's just an animal who will do it in its own time. Its ears slip in and out of holes that it tries to fit through, its feathers become ruffled after a battle, and its calls are there when it's trying to communicate. Trico's animation and relationship with the player character are also a fascinating addition and unlike what you'll see in other games. Trico will need to be comforted after a battle, with the player character having to soothe the beast down from a height of panic after it's taken care of the few enemies it has to throughout the adventure. And its eyes will light up when it can see or smell food that you'll have to then fetch if it's in a place the beast itself can't get to. It's not a surprise to say that the player character and Trico's journey takes in some exciting set pieces, both of the action-orientated and emotional variety, helping you to feel personally connected to Trico itself. After a battle, I found myself constantly wanting to calm it down as quickly as I could and held on to it during platform sections, trusting that Trico would make the jump needed to get to safety. In hindsight, it's clear to see that the jumps that Trico almost misses or struggles to make are scripted, but at the time I was unsure. Such is the way the game portrays these moments. The developers have made a wonderful attempt at making every part of Trico and the boy's journey feel authentic, and it adds a layer of feeling and trust between the player and what's happening on screen that's difficult for other developers to replicate. But for all of its touching moments and atmosphere, The Last Guardian has a number of issues. For starters, the camera is sometimes unwieldy and struggles to focus on the player characters, especially when Trico is within a small confined space. I couldn't imagine how difficult it must be to program a camera to track a small player character when the only other object in a small room is a giant beast that takes up probably 80% of the screen, but it's an issue that's prevalent. The game recognises the issues and at times fades to black and repositions the camera elsewhere, but this doesn't always fix the issue. Frame rate can also dip to unfathomably low levels, although, unexpectedly, it seems to cope well in confined spaces. Ironically, it's usually when you venture out into a large, more open area that the frame rate starts to chug, so much so that anyone not familiar with frame rate levels and how they work would easily be able to notice the difference. I'm usually quite relaxed when reviewing games and that I don't mention minor frame rate issues, but The Last Guardian's problems are so noticeable that it wouldn't be right not to highlight it. Controlling the boy as well is at times difficult. He has a tendency to grab onto either Trico or a chain and not let go no matter how many times you press the X button to let go. It's also difficult to jump off of these items too, especially when you're on a chain and attempting to jump behind you. Instead of propelling yourself through the air like, say, Nathan Drake, the boy often just climbs further up or does nothing at all. While playing through the game, I often wondered what the effect of making Trico that bit smaller would be on both the camera and frame rate issues. Having a companion that size around you at all times is really quite something, as he can take up most of the playing area at times, but reducing his size to fix those issues may have taken away some of the grandeur and mystique from such a phenomenal looking and moving beast, so I can understand why they wouldn't have wanted to compromise. The issues are unfortunate to say the least, but I wouldn't say that it affected my time with the game overall. Sure, there were some frustrating moments here and there, but The Last Guardian moves at a slower pace than most games, where time isn't of the essence, and so you're able to handle the camera and control issues on your own without trying to get them from A to B in X amount of time. Should that have been the case, these could have been almost game breaking, but thankfully they're not. The Last Guardian offers something different and contrasts the hand-holding nature and ease of progression that modern titles like to offer. Despite all of its issues, The Last Guardian stands as a bastion of what video games used to be in terms of progression, combined with an animal so imposing, mythical and mesmerising that it's a wonder how they managed to make it so lifelike. The Last Guardian won't be to everyone's taste, but you should go out of your way to experience it for yourself.